into the chat for one thing in your daily life that you'd like to automate. I can see some very good answers coming up there. Some cooking, cleaning the home, dealing with counsel. That's a pain that we've all experienced. So look, I'm going to dive right in because we have limited time today, and I think what I'm really excited to get to is passing over to Sam, who's going to lead us through a live building session. And hopefully you've all received your login details for Joseph. If you haven't already had the chance, please do jump on, go to dashboard.joseflegal.com and log in via the details that you would have received in your inbox. And with that, I am going to get started on our session. Thank you very much to Legal Operators for having us on no code for in-house legal teams. My name's Tom. I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of Josef. Josef is a no-code legal automation platform that's used by legal teams all over the world to transform the way they work. And you're going to see some of that today. What are we going to cover in the next 45 to 50 minutes? So after a brief introduction, we're going to dive straight into an introduction to no code itself. What is it? Why are in-house teams using it? We'll look at what some other teams are using no-code platforms for. I think it's always really important to see best practice and what else people out there are doing. And then, of course, we will be having a live bot building session. Sam will lead before time for Q&A. If you have any questions at all, and I mean any questions about Josef, about no code generally, about one of us, about some of what other customers are doing, please throw them in the chat. We will get to them towards the end of the session. Cool. The introduction. I wanted to start with an introduction to me and my co-founder, Sam. I am a former corporate litigator. I was a high court law clerk, a consultant to not-for-profits, and then I founded Josef, turning myself into a legal tech founder. And I kind of like to think of myself as someone in legal operations now, because what we do all day, every day, is we help corporate legal teams, law firms, government legal teams to build tools that help them to work better, deliver better services to their clients. Really pleased to be joined by my co-founder, Sam, also a former attorney, also worked in the court system, but unlike me, before Josef, Sam also founded one of the first truly successful B2C legal tech platforms, helping consumers avoid unfair fines. And he brings a lot of that experience working with end users, with people consuming legal tech to ensure that we're building and delivering the best possible experience for clients on the platform. We founded Josef to empower legal professionals like all of you to use technology to work better and deliver better services to your clients. And the way that we do this is by giving you access to a legal automation platform that lets you take your workflows, your processes, your documents, and turn them into tools that help you to save time, delight your clients with a better way of accessing legal help. A little bit about the platform itself, just so you can start to kind of think about what you might like to build when we get to the 20-minute building session. We think that legal automation, and this is one of the, I suppose, the basic tenets of a no-code approach to software development, we think it has to be simple. We think it needs to be simple enough for the least technical person in your team to do it. This is a really hard challenge. A lot of the users on our platform are not technical. And so we're constantly thinking about ways to make it easier for them Visual cues is a big part of that. So no-code platforms are known for being, click, type, drag and drop platforms. What we also want to do is make sure that while you're building legal automation tools, you don't lose that human element. The thing that I think makes the best legal services stand out, it's when we bring that empathy to the delivery of those services to our clients. And so for us, this means ensuring that the user experience, both for any of you building on a no-code platform, but also for any of the end users of the tools that are built, is accessible and hopefully joyful. That this should be fun. And then finally, no-code platforms are about taking your expertise and turning it into something powerful enough to deliver the answers to questions that your clients might need, to generate, useful outputs like answers to legal questions or self-service documents and forms. The way that we do that is by powering the platform with a pretty advanced logic engine. And you'll see a little bit of that when Sam runs through the build a bot part of the session. You can really take some of that complex legal logic you work with and turn it into easy to use tools for you and the rest of your business. And so this is just a few examples of companies, law firms using no-code platforms that we've seen doing some pretty incredible things to transform the way that they work and deliver help to their clients. That's the very high level introduction to us and to Josef. But let's take a step back and just talk about what no code actually is as a concept. No code means that you and your teams, the subject matter experts, can build and deploy tools, applications without involving the IT team, without involving software engineers, potentially without involving external consultants. No code is about making complex technology accessible to people who aren't technical. I think especially in this world that we're working in now since COVID, we're working remotely, we're working in businesses where the IT teams tend to be pretty stretched. The ability to take control over your own tools has become pretty important. We think, and this is what no-code legal automation is all about, that automation can't just sit with those technical experts, the engineers, the IT teams, that it actually needs to belong to the legal operations managers, the lawyers and risk and compliance managers who know their own work and clients better than anyone else, so that we can kind of address that bottleneck that arises when we want to automate something and the technical resources aren't available to us. I think what no code is about, kind of above everything, is putting you and your teams in a position to build, sure, but ultimately to control the tools that you need to do your best work. It's a whole new trend in the way that software development is done, and the way that it's taking off in legal teams, I think, is one of the really exciting, recent developments in legal technology. But where we wanted to take this today is talking at a more concrete level about why this matters to in-house legal teams in particular. I think from our perspective, it's because the best legal teams are already finding new ways to streamline their service delivery, to become more efficient and, deliver that, extraordinary client experience to their business. What I'm going to do now is actually run us through a series of things that we have been told by in-house legal teams over the last little while, and how no-code automation responds to some of these challenges. For anyone who has experienced any of the things that I'm about to walk us through, please feel free to drop your stories or your follow-up questions in the chat, or just feel free to throw in an emoji if this is something that has happened to you, a little thumbs up, or thumbs down, depending on what the experience has been. But I'm going to share some reflections now on why we think that this type of automation matters for in-house legal teams. So one of the things that we get told by legal teams is that they feel the pressure to change the perception that the legal team is, the house of no, that legal is a blocker, not a facilitator. No-code automation is about building self-service, self-help, and self-sufficiency for both your team and your clients. It enables you to build the tools that your clients need to do their work so that you can focus on the things that matter. You can contribute to that growth. This is almost like one of the first things that GCs and their teams tell us about why they're interested in automation. It's because they want to change the way that their team is working. Who here has been rebuffed by the IT team when the legal team needed help? I think this is an experience that we've all had. What this approach to automation enables us to do is give you and your teams the Will has never not been rebuffed. Thank you, Will. I hope that changes at some time. No code is about giving you the ability to drag and drop, to take the building blocks of your workflows, turn them into these tools without writing a single line of code, so that you can maintain and update and control them into the future. This, I think, is one of the more common refrains we hear from lawyers in the in-house space, who don't want to spend their time answering the same set of questions day in, day out, knowing that the answers to those questions could or should be accessible to everyone in the legal team. Automation platforms that enable you to build self-service tools, that helps to solve this problem, freeing up your time to work on the higher value and more strategic work. I think the other one that we found is in-house teams finding that they buy tech, and then all of a sudden, after it's been implemented and they want to make a change, they can't because it's too complex. And this goes back to the other challenge around getting IT help. They don't feel like they have the level of control they need to exercise over it. One of the big pieces about being able to build your own tools is that you then can maintain and update and control it into the future. That's a big piece for lawyers. They want to know how their tools are built. If they're going to be delivering answers to questions, legal questions especially, they want to know how those answers are being delivered. And then the last one, I feel like this is still the big one. Every legal team we talk to feels the pressure of budget cuts, feels the pressure of doing more with less. That ultimately is what no-code platforms enable legal teams to do. You can scale your own services to meet the business needs, but also empower your team to do some of that work themselves, to look at your own problems, come up with your own ideas for the solutions, and then make them a reality. That's an extraordinarily empowering experience. And I'm glad to see some questions coming through on how to drive business user adoption. Sam, that's definitely something we should be able to cover off later. And one of the big challenges that we see people addressing in pretty creative ways on the platform. And I'm both happy and sad to hear from from Andres that you can relate to all of them. That is both a good and a bad thing. Okay, last piece from me before I hand over to Sam, a little bit of inspiration from what other teams are doing out there in the market. We've seen some pretty clear patterns emerge when we look at the ways in which both our customers and other companies are using no-code legal automation platforms. There are some pretty clear use cases out there. I'm going to move through these pretty quickly and try to hand over to Sam in about 2 to 3 minutes. So if you haven't had a chance already, feel free to put one eye onto logging into the platform in the meantime, so you are ready to go when Sam kicks us off. So first big use case that we see being built on no-code automation platforms are intake and referral tools. The starting point for accessing legal help in your business will so often be, a shared @legal inbox, or it will be the person from down the hall walking up to you in the days when we were all sitting in offices all day, every day, tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, I've got this legal question, can you help me? We see so many teams starting off by building a tool that streamlines that intake and referral process, so that you're going to get a full set of instructions from your clients anytime they want the answer to a question, anytime they want you to review a contract, anytime they want your help. They're going to come to you via an automation tool that ensures they provide you with the full set of information that you need to do your work, to give them the answer to their question as quickly and fully as possible. So intake and referral tools, what we sometimes refer to at Josef as the legal team front door. You'll often find these embedded on a SharePoint page or whatever intranet you're using. That's been a big use case for no-code legal automation. Second big category of tools that we see are what we call decision-making tools, taking the logic underlying the frequently asked questions and turning them into self-service tools. We see examples in this category all over the place. A classic one is a delegations of authority tool. A legal team builds a tool so that no one in your team is ever asked again who can or needs to sign this particular document. And instead, you can take what might be a static policy that unfortunately too few people actually use to answer the question for themselves, turn it into something dynamic that the rest of the business can access. Other examples in this space include one that Sam's going to dive into a little bit later, especially in privacy and compliance. What do we need to do in response to certain types of issues? Another really great example I've seen recently is like a corporate entity register, where we have an in-house team that's built a tool for the rest of the business to know, who the directors are of different entities, what their registered address is, things like that, that should be self-service for the rest of the business. Probably the biggest category of tool on Josef is document automation tools. There is a big trend in no-code automation towards building self-service document automation. This is all about ensuring that the rest of your business can take some of those simpler, high-volume documents like NDAs, confidentiality agreements, services agreements, form requests that would usually make their way into your inbox and generate, what are hopefully perfect first drafts for themselves, or generate a first draft that ends up in your inbox for you to review, finalize, and send out to the person who needs them. The reason this is such a big one is just because of the time saving that it offers. The ability to pull together both the data that your business users are inputting, combine that with a document that needs to be generated, and get you all the way to that 99% first draft before any lawyer time has been taken up is an immense opportunity. for legal teams. This is one that we've seen in-house teams use really effectively. A good example from the esports giant Fnatic. They built 15 bots for their most commonly requested documents to create a self-service portal for the rest of the business, just for the documents that they knew were capable of being automated by their business users. Last couple of examples. Workflow and process automation is a big area. We actually saw one of our law firm customers, Arent Fox, a big national firm, partner with one of their clients to respond to a State Department audit by building a suite of tools that helped that client to gather information from about 600 different sites around the country that were being audited by the State Department. Okay. Last one before I throw to Sam is just that it's not really a use case, but it is an approach. More and more, we are seeing legal teams think about how to educate and inspire both lawyers and also the rest of their business on the possibilities that legal tech and automation represents. I think this is so important. It goes to the question we had earlier about how to drive, adoption among the rest of the business. What you're about to find out from Sam is that no-code automation lowers the barriers to entry to the point where the universe of potential builders and use cases really does expand kind of exponentially, giving you an opportunity to educate and inspire both your teams and the rest of the business on a totally new way of working and delivering legal services. Hopefully, this has been a helpful introduction to what no-code is, what we're seeing in the market, some of the challenges that no-code responds to. And with all of that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and throw to my co-founder, Sam, who is going to dive straight into how you can build a bot for yourself. Sam, over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Tom. And thanks everyone for joining as well and for all of your questions. I've been jumping in to the extent that I can. And if we don't get to any of them while we're running through the platform, we're going to be finishing up in about 20 minutes, or we're aiming to finish up in about 20 minutes. So we'll leave lots of time for questions and discussion at the end. So keep them coming. Just checking, can everyone see my screen at the moment? Cool, good one. The other logistics piece before we dive in is we've unusually for a webinar given all of the attendees access to a platform, which you should have received yesterday at some point. If you haven't yet had a chance and you want to follow along at home, there'll be an email in your inbox from hello@joseflegal.com, which asks you to activate your account. If you don't want to follow along, that's fine. I'll move through kind of quickly to keep it interesting for you. And if you, final logistics, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to support@joseflegal.com and they'll help you get access if you need it. So one of the things that we wanted to do today, obviously Tom's talked us through the broader context, why is no code interesting to in-house teams? What can you use it for? What are the common applications? How can it help you in your day-to-day work? What I wanted to do for the next 20 minutes with all of you is show you how you can actually bring that to life, because I think that's one of the really interesting parts of Josef for all of you. It is a way of empowering you to do all of that good work that Tom just showed us and described to us. To make that as real as possible in 20 minutes, I wanted to break it down into the different steps that I help our customers go through from when we first meet, before our kickoff call, into the training session, and thereafter helping them build and launch their bots. Before we jump into the platform, there are two things we need to do and two things I do with all of our customers. The first one is identifying opportunities. Loving the green sheen from my other screen. It's a lot. The first thing we need to do is actually decide what we want to build. So Tom talked us through all those great use cases. So intake, decision automation or expert automation, document generation, etc. But it's really important that we choose the right thing to build before we actually build it, right? Lots of ways we can do that. And we've seen lots of bots, so we know what works well and what doesn't. I thought this quote from Anna Golovsky, who is executive manager of legal ops at IAG, which is one of Australia's biggest insurers that we work with. And her advice is just to look for low value, repeatable documents and tasks that your team spends a lot of time on. So that's a really good sort of place to start. As a broad framework, look for things that are high frequency, repetitive, things that you care about. If you're looking to automate processes that you value, you're more likely to have follow through. And as I think it was Kenneth's question suggested, build things that your business side users care about as well. That's a really important part of this, because we might build things that help us in our day-to-day work, but if the people who we're building for don't want to use it, then there's not a lot of point in doing that. So that's step number one. Step number two is to map it out. Now, this is all sort of before we jump into the platform. And the reason why I encourage you to map it out is it's going to put us in a better position to actually build the bot. Some people like just jumping straight into the platform, which we're going to do in about 20 seconds. But I encourage you to sort of pause at this point in the build process, figure out all of the different variables, figure out where it's going to sit in your broader processes. Again, I think another question from Kenneth, is it going to integrate with other systems? Are you going to access the documents through email or through your document management system? And then once we've answered some of those questions and got a sense of where the tool's going to sit and what it's going to do, then we can jump into the platform, which we can do now. When Colin and I were talking about this session and what would be relevant to all of you, we wanted to come up with a use case or an application for Josef that would be relevant and that would speak to you. The first thing I thought of was the CCPA, so California's recent Privacy Act, because that's something, looking at all of the names on the list and the attendees, that's something you've no doubt dealt with over the last couple of years, or at least starting to deal with now. The CCPA applies lots of obligations to certain companies, particularly in relation to the use of personal information. So one example is a notice of collection. The company needs to provide a notice of collection. Some companies incorporate this into their privacy policy, which sits on the website. But the CCPA requires that you provide this notice to people whose personal details you're collecting, to tell them what you're taking from them and the purposes for which you are taking that information as well. So a lot of people have a separate notice. So in this kind of imagined scenario, and this is obviously based on a lot of other tools that we've seen in-house teams, we are imagining that business side users need to generate a notice at collection, a CCPA notice at collection, from time to time when they're launching different tools or launching a new app, or even building new parts of the marketing website, for example. So if we were going to do that, and we were going to build this out in Josef, this is the Josef dashboard that you all have access to. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new bot. So I'm going to click into my drop down. And if you click into yours, there won't be anything in there because you'll have an empty account. But click into the drop down, scroll to the bottom, and click Create Bot. And if you want to follow along at home, just do this as I go. So then we're going to give the bot a name. I'm actually just going to give this one a generic name because I want to take a step back. So I'm going to call it like intake bot or something like that, and click Create. Once I do that, I've created my bot and I get access to these 6 tabs down the left-hand side. And these are the tabs where I'm going to create the content of the bot and actually start building it out with you. I'm going to jump to the flowchart, and I encourage all of you to do the same if you're building along at home. And flowchart is where we build out the content of the bot. So it's where we tell the bot what to say. It's also where we upload the relevant documents that we're going to generate. First thing I need to do is add my first message. And so I do that by clicking on that little field, and then a sidebar is going to appear. In the sidebar, we need to choose at least 3 things. So the first is we need to give that message a name. So I'm going to call this one introduction. I like to use a combination of numbers and words so I can refer back to it. Now that message name is just for our reference. It's not going to appear to the end user. We type in our message text. So what is the message actually going to say? And here it's going to say something like, what can I help you with today? And then we're going to choose a response type. And so this is what the bot is. This sets parameters around what the end user can insert in response to our message. If I click into that drop down, you'll see I've got different message types here. So I've got no response, text, like free text, single choice, which is like multiple choice, but you only get to pick one answer, which has text, number, date, currency, etc. Multiple choice, where I can pick more than one, full name, etc., etc. I'm not going to go through all of them now. Here, I'm going to make this a single choice text type response because I only want people to be able to pick one option. And if I do that, I'll get access to this possible responses field. And so in here, I'm going to add something like, think of all the things that your business side clients might want from you. So contracts, privacy, employment, etc. And then I'm going to hit create. So those are the 3 things you need to do: name, type in the message text, and choose a response type. That's it. And then we've got our very first message. Then we want to keep going through that process, right? So I want to try and automate this with you now, this document with you. So to create our second message, we simply click on the first one and we get the option to connect a new message. Click on that and start creating our second message, which here is going to be, I'm going to have another kind of branching message. We're just going to ask them how we can help them in relation to privacy if we assume that they click that. So again, what can I help you with? And do the same, single choice text. And let's do a collection. And something about right to delete, which is one of the rights under the CCPA. Other. Create. And now we've got 2 messages and we're starting to build out the content of the bot. Let's assume we're going to generate this CCPA notice of collection. The first thing we do, and this takes us back to the idea of mapping it out. If I was doing this in real time, I would be pulling out the different variables beforehand and just making sure that I had them all sort of sitting in a document somewhere, so I knew broadly what I was going to take from the end user in order to generate the document. I would then start building out my bot to ask for that information from the end user. So here I need to know what the company is, the company name. So connect a new message, message number 3, company. What is the name of the company? I suppose if it was internally, it would be, what was the name of the corporate entity that's relevant here. I've got no response, but I want free text here. So that they can actually type a response in, and then I'm going to click create. Next one is, if we scroll down, the categories of personal information to be collected from you. We can do this in a few different ways, but I'm going to keep it simple for now for obvious reasons. I'm going to jump back into Josef, connect my 4th message, which will be personal information types. What types of personal information are you collecting? And we'll make this single choice text again. And then we can just take these different options, direct identifiers, and add them in as options direct identifiers. Verification information. Household information. And other. I'm not going to make you all watch me type in every different type of personal information, but you can imagine. So we hit create, and we would then continue doing that for the other different fields that we need to complete here, phone number, email, etc. Once we've done all of that, we are ready to upload the document. And so we're going to call it CCPA Notice Act Collection. We are here going to change something that we haven't actually changed yet, which is the message type. So this is what presents to the end user. And I'll show you what this all looks like in a minute to the end user. I'm going to choose here a document type message. And this is where it actually generates the document in the flow that you're creating. So here is your Notice Act Collection. And if we were doing this for real, I'd give them some advice about how to use that document. Response type, we don't need a response at this point. It's just sending them a message. So we'll choose no response. And I'll also make this a final message because we're at the end of the flow. And we'll click create. Once I've done that, we get access to this add document button. So we're going to click on that. We're going to drag our Microsoft Word file into the pop-up. And it is then going to generate a Josef version of this document. So this is a simplified sort of representation of the XML for anyone familiar with how Microsoft Word works. But broadly, all that means for you is that you can jump in, add automation to the document without having to know, any coding or the squiggly brackets or all the sorts of things that you might be used to in a traditional doc automation platform, which makes our life a lot easier. Here, various functionality, I can apply rules, I can apply looping, but the one thing I wanted to show you today was the ability to take variables from the flow and drop them straight into the document. So here, I'm going to replace these little fields with the answer to the message called company. And here, we don't need these anymore because we're just going to insert the answer to the message called personal information types. And then it's going to list it there in a narrative form. If I want it to be generated as a PDF, I can toggle that over. And once I'm happy with that, I'll get out and go back to the flow. Now, for everyone following along at home, I did not expect you to just upload a document that quickly, but hopefully at least you've been able to add a few messages and connect them together. Once we're happy with that and we want to see what we've actually produced, we click on preview and check out the bot that we've built. What can I help you with today? This is an unbranded Josef bot. What can I help you with today? Contracts, privacy, employment. Let's say privacy. What can I help you with? Notice a collection. What's the name of the entity? ABC Co. What types of personal information are you collecting? Let's just say direct identifiers today. And here is your Notice Act collection. And then if I download it, it will generate a PDF version of the Notice Act collection with all of that information dropped in. And then we've got direct identifiers. I actually built that incorrectly. I should have made this question a multiple choice question. I made it a single choice, but I think you get the idea. I've got a few more minutes and I just want to show you one more thing because this is, look, some of you this may be your sort of first introduction to the idea of a legal bot and automation tools. And if so, there's probably a lot that you're sort of grappling with at the moment. For some of you, as I can see in the thread, this is not, your first rodeo, so to speak. So if we were to build out some more sophisticated aspects of the tool, because you can go really, really deep and really complex with Josef, as well as it being very simple and easy to pick up, we could start branching, for example. So let's branch from message number 2 which, if we remember correctly, asked us what we wanted to do in relation to privacy, notice at collection, right to delete. Let's pretend we've got a request for a right to delete, and let's call this a right to delete. And if we go to some guidance around right to know, we can see that businesses must respond to a request within 45 calendar days. So let's pretend we wanted to give the client from the business the answer to the question, like, when must you respond to this request by? So the first thing we need to know is when we got the request. So when did you receive the request? We'll choose a date type message rather, and click create. And what we do then is we're going to jump into what we call the variables library. And so this is where you can start to get quite complicated in Josef, or sophisticated, and you can create a calculation. And so here, this calculation would be date for response. I want the result to be an exact date because we're telling them when to respond by. And then we start building out our calculation. I love this field in the platform. You can just type and build out a calculation that you want to apply to some logic or some outcome in Josef. So here I would make it right to delete, which is the name of the message, plus 45 duration days. And so this is the calculation I want. The date that the end user inputs in response to right to delete plus 45 days, and then click create. And now I've got this little variable that I can input, and I'll show you where that drops in a moment. If I add a new message here and say right to delete response, you must respond to the request by date for response. I'm going to make it a no response message type and click create. And the final thing I have to do here is just add some rules for the branching. I know I've got a minute left, so I'm going to do it really quickly. And these rules determine when you go from one message to another or from another to another. So rules is like our conditional logic. That's how we give the bot a brain. So I'm going to add here, if the answer to the message called to is notice at collection, then we're going to proceed down this branch. But if it is right to delete, then they're going to proceed down this branch. It's as simple as that to start building it out and building out conditional logic. If I click on preview, hope we got that right. If I click on right to delete, I'm asked when I received the request, select a date, and then it calculates when we have to respond by. And you can imagine if this was a real bot, this is sort of answering FAQs that pop up for your internal clients around privacy. So final thing really quickly is just the design, which I think is really cool. So we've seen this in the chat interface. Obviously, make it your own. And you can also launch it not as a chat bot, but as a smart form as well. And so that looks different. Something like this. And so then we go through, answer all the messages, and people can see all of the different fields that they need to respond to. Pretty whirlwind. There's a bunch of other functionality that we're not going to talk about today, but we can get into it in the Q&A if anyone has any questions. I see the chat going off, so to speak. But let's just wrap that up and turn it over to questions. So third step is build, which we just did together. Hopefully some of you were able to follow along at home. The final thing we want to do is test and iterate. So once we've done the build, unfortunately, we're not quite ready for launch as much as we'd like to be. We still need to go through and do user testing with our colleagues in the legal ops team or the legal team, and then with our clients as well, making sure they understand what we've built. Probably a lot of the people on this call are really adept at building digital tools, but not everyone is at first go. And so there is, a process of making sure that we're building something that's really easy to use rather than just functional. And Kenneth, that goes back to one of your questions around driving business side use. One of the key levers we have at our disposal is building a tool that provides for a good user experience. So that's one of the things we work through with our customers as well. With that, I'm going to open it up to questions.
All right, I'm going to jump back in here because we've got a couple of questions in the chat. I have been furiously typing, trying to get to all of them. Thank you all for your questions. And also well done, Sam, on building what is like a pretty serious and sophisticated bot in not very long at all. Hopefully those of you following along at home could keep up. Let me go to one of the questions that I promised to answer when we got to the Q&A. So Daniel has asked how we make the case to stakeholders to use something like Josef instead of building ticketing workflows in a legacy tool like a Jira that already supports other functions. I love this question because it is one that comes up quite a lot, and it is the right question to ask. I'll give you a real world example from a big tech company in the US that uses Josef and uses Zendesk as their internal ticketing and support system. The reason that they decided to use Josef was, yes, Daniel, as you pointed out, the fact that they wanted to have control over the entry point to the legal team without needing IT team support. But it was more than that. It was the fact that they wanted to build what was actually like a pretty complex decision tree based workflow when they were doing that kind of legal intake piece. Depending on the type of query that the user had or legal request that the user had, there were different questions that they needed to ask, different types of information. If it was a contract review request, then they wanted to ask these questions. If it was a question about, the application of a particular piece of regulation or legislation, then they needed to ask this set of questions. And what Josef enabled them to do was really clearly map out those different paths and ensure that the only questions that were being asked were the relevant ones. They then kind of connected that up via an integration that we have with Zendesk. But that really enabled them to ensure that they got the information they needed, but also the business user had a better experience of asking for legal help than just the sort of 3 or 4 static forms, form fields that you might find when creating a new Jira ticket. So it does go a bit beyond just kind of the do-it-yourself to some of the advanced logic functions that you'll find in Josef. Sam, I might let you jump in for the next one, or I can keep going.
Sure. What? Sorry, I don't know if we're going back through old questions.
No, that was the only old question that I hadn't gotten to in my furious typing. So now we're down to the bottom 2 in the chat.
Cool. So Ada has asked, can you run metrics for all the inquiries? Ada, if I understand correctly, is that can we see the activity or the data that's generated by each of the bots? Tom's nodding his head. So as soon as the bot is launched, yes, you can access all of the data in the back end of Josef. There was a little activity tab that I did not click on for the purposes of time. And once you've launched a bot, you can then access all of that data in the back end. A lot of customers use that for a time, or also, as one of the earlier questions suggested, and as Tom just suggested with that integration with Zendesk, end up connecting it to another system, like a matter management system that they use, so they can see that data there as well. It's a good question.
Awesome.
Andres, good question. Is Joseph typically embedded in a legal intranet, and how do clients access the bots? This goes back to Kenneth's earlier question about how we drive business side adoption too. One of the key things that we need to do is think about how we are going to deliver the bots to our clients. One of the simplest places or the easiest places for us to do that is the legal intranet. That's often one of the first things that I ask people when they join Joseph. Do you already have an intranet in place? Do people actually use it? Because to the extent that we can leverage existing workflows, existing knowledge management tools, that's going to make our lives a lot easier. One of the common mistakes I see for people embarking on one of these journeys is they want to remake the whole process all at once. That's fine, and I love the ambition, but to the extent that we can just keep it contained around building a bot at first, that's going to put us in a better position. So think about where people go to find the answers to these questions already, and that's a great place to embed the bot.
Thanks, Sam. I'm going to jump into a few questions still in the chat. All right, I'm going to work my way up. So Sachin asks about data portability. Absolutely. You can transfer data from Joseph, either by exporting the data directly from your dashboard or by sending it via an integration directly to whichever other platform you want the data to persist in. That can include the records of interactions with your bots, or it can include any of the documents generated. It's pretty simple, both in terms of that export functionality and also hooking up Joseph to send the data directly to another platform. I've got a couple of questions in here about pricing and licensing. Again, like my first answer to that question is always going to be, let's have a conversation to understand what the needs of your team and organization are. But at a high level, there are two inputs into our cost model. The first is the number of builders that you have on the platform. So the number of people doing exactly what Sam just did and building bots on the dashboard. And the second input into our pricing is the number of interactions with your live bots. How many times are those bots actually being used? You know, how many times is that point of value creation when a question is answered or a request is submitted or a document is generated? How many times does that happen? It's a volume-based licensing model to ensure that the value that's being created on the platform is aligned with the price that you're paying. So those are the two key inputs.
Yeah, and just to add on to the end of that, Vikas has asked, is it license or a one-time build cost? Tom's question or answer probably answered that. But in terms of the one-time build cost, we certainly offer services to help people build if they need it. We know that you're all very time-strapped and very busy people. But our vision and when this works best is when you build it. So that's the licensing model that Tom just described.
And so yes, Andres, that the answer to your question is a definite yes, around the different types of requests and the data that can be later used for reporting purposes. That is one of the, to be honest, one of the key benefits that we see in-house teams telling us about. Once you've set up that, this comes up especially around intake. Once you set up an automated intake and triage process on Joseph, the ability to then sort of use that data to understand where the heaviest load is coming from in terms of the different types of legal work that you're doing. That is definitely something that people use the platform for. And I can see Kyle has put in a question about AI and ML. So the way that Joseph works, it is decision tree based. So it's a rules-based system. So you're absolutely using kind of logic to determine which question is going to be asked next. One of the things that our customers find really useful is the ability to take existing workflows or documents that they've automated, duplicate them or use them as a base, like a skeleton, for the next thing that they're going to build. So it's not necessarily that it is suggesting additional workflows that you should be working on, but it's definitely making it easy for you to get started on the next one once you've broken the ice and built that first tool.
Yeah, and I would also add to that, just my role at Josef is heading the customer success team. That is also until we have AI and ML that will do all that work for you. That's really our job. So we will sit down and work with you on the whole time you're at Josef on what you should be building and what areas you should be focusing on. Yeah.
I'm conscious that we're 3 minutes out from time, and I want to give Colin time to wrap things up. So I'm just going to say again that anyone who has any questions at all, please feel free. I've dropped our emails directly into the chat. That's probably the best way to follow up from this. We will reach out to you as well with a bit more information about the form. But any questions we didn't get to, apologies. More than happy to have that conversation directly and answer them in your own time.
Perfect. I seen one you did answer from Michael Cottrell from EA, asked about the APIs. And, I believe the response was like that you connect with any tool. You've got open APIs, correct?
Yeah, hopefully. Sorry, Michael. That is my answer to your question is a little bit further up the chat because everyone was so enthusiastic. But hopefully you caught the answer a little bit higher in the chat, but really happy to have a one-on-one follow-up and tell you a little more about some of those connections.
Perfect. I'm astounded by all the questions, some amazing questions in there. I didn't even get to ask my own. So that's phenomenal. Thanks everybody for coming today and leaning into this conversation. Josef's just an amazing tool. I had the fortune of spending time with Sam and Tom recently and really kind of looking at just how to differentiate from some of the other tools out there that are also doing amazing work. I felt like building your own bots were just so empowering to be able to do it yourself. Again, I just want to thank everybody for being here today. I will share a copy of the recording. Should get that in your inbox by tomorrow morning. If you want the slide decks from Tom, we can send those on as well. If you have any questions, reach out to Tom at joseflegal.com or Sam at joseflegal.com. And with that, have a great day, guys. I bid you all farewell and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Colin.
Thanks, guys.